All right. Good afternoon, everybody, and to our online attendees. And welcome to this seminar, which we have titled Fixing It Right, or Roads, Bridges, and Drainage Infrastructure. And this afternoon, we will feature Mr. Adesh Surijnath, who's the head of Civil Projects Division, Trinidad Consultants. Mr. Rakesh Ramnath, President of the Construction Management Institute of Trinidad and Tobago. And of course, I am your host for this evening, Dr. Don Samuel. I'm also a facilities manager, at the universities. And this topic has been generating a lot of interest in the national discourse and on social media as well. So we thought this was a right time for us to come together and deal with or talk about the technical issues around the maintenance of our roads, bridges, and drainage infrastructure. So the agenda for this evening, before I ask these speakers to say a short hello, is we're going to talk about the short-term, and long-term solutions for the rehabilitation of roads and bridges. We're also going to talk about the short-term and long-term solutions to the National Flooding Challenge. I understand that right now there are parts of the country which are experiencing floods. So it's a very relevant current topic. We're looking at the short-term and long-term solution for repairs of our landslips. We're going to make a call for annual inspections of the nation's infrastructure via a report card. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We're going to talk about the use of qualified and experienced local consultants and contractors. We're going to advocate for the use of transparent procurement in the execution of construction contracts. All right, so at this time, I want to invite Mr. Surijnath to say hello and also to provide some opening remarks, and then we'll get into a panel discussion. And then I'll invite Mr. Ramnath to also make some opening remarks, and then we get into the panel discussion. So, Mr. Surijnath.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Adesh Surijnath. Currently I'm employed at Trinidad Consultants as the head of the Project Civils Division. For this meeting, I am participating as a interested citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm a registered engineer with the Board of Engineers of Trinidad and Tobago. I'm also a member of Association of Professional Engineers of Trinidad and Tobago. These particular topics are of interest to me, and when Dr. Samuel had asked me if I'd participate, I don't think I hesitated really too much to say, yes, I'm willing to participate. I think it's a discussion that is relevant given the current circumstances, what we're seeing in the country happening in terms of deterioration of our roads, of certain bridges, infrastructure on a whole. Again, the quality of the infrastructure that a country has is a reflection on the development of the country itself.
Great.
So I would like, as I say, I am pleased to be participating in this, and I'll be willing. I hope I can answer any questions that are posed to me to the best of my ability. And I'll hand you back over to Dr. Samuel or to Rakesh for his opening remarks.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Surijnath. And you don't have to refer to me as Dr. Samuel. We're all colleagues, so you could say Don. But I will refer to Rakesh Ramnath as Mr. Ramnath. So, Mr. Ramnath, please say your opening remarks.
Thank you, Don, and pleasant good afternoon to yourself and Mr. Surijnath. Really happy to always be representing the Construction Management Institute of Trinidad and Tobago as the president. In my personal capacity, I have a vested interest in the development of the country and the infrastructure, namely. We all need to continue to advocate for improvement of our infrastructure. I mean, right now, some parts of the country are once again underwater. And how often is this going to continue to happen? So we really need to come together as engineers, as colleagues, and to come up with some solutions in order to really deal with these challenges that we face. I know whatever is to be discussed here is to really shed positive light towards the development of our country And there's no intention to blame any government or ministry or anything like that, but we really want to provide some real solutions and help wherever we can in our professional and personal capacity. Back to you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Ramnath. And on that note, I'll also remind attendees that we just want to refrain from any potential libel or slanderous statements. I did put that up in the YouTube chat. And of course, your questions can focus on any topic in relation to roads, drainage, and bridges infrastructure, landslips as well. Floods, a very hot topic. And you can put your questions in the chat. So we're going to start the discussion. And first one we want to talk about is design. Okay. So design of what? Design of roads. So let's start with that. You know, as civil engineers, we've been trained in the proper design of roads, taking into account loads and, of course, the geotechnical conditions of the soil. And the question I wanted to pose to, I'm going to probably stop using formalities and just call it by your first name, the Adesh, is this. What is the challenge right now with respect to what we are trained to do and what is actually being done in terms of design? What is that? Are there any challenges with that?
Well, in terms of the challenges, I mean, in university at least, they basically teach you two methods of design. Let's suppose taking roads as an example. You have
sure, yes, we can deal with the drainage after, but we'll take the roads first. Yeah, roads and bridges. Yeah,
empirical method of design, and they have analytical methods. Under empirical method of design, you have to understand under what conditions these empirical methods were developed, so that you can see whether or not these empirical methods are applicable to our situation here. Again, with the analytical methods, again, that's a more in-depth analysis. We're looking at stresses and strains and material properties. So that method basically forces you to look at your local conditions and in terms of and select parameters that are appropriate for the local conditions, rather than just wholesale adapting an empirical method which you don't understand under what conditions those empirical equations were developed and for the design. I think we had a Dr. Ray Furlong, who had a seminar yesterday for UTT. He and I were talking about something, something like the empirical method of pavement design using the AASHTO 1993 method. There are various structural coefficients that you use. You have structural coefficients for the asphalt, for the granular subbase, the granular base course. The granular subbase and the granular base course, those structural coefficients are tied back to what you call the California bearing ratio, which is a measure of the strength of the material. So that's a kind of straightforward thing. The structural coefficient of the asphalt, that's tied back to the elastic modulus, which is dependent upon temperature. So again, when you look at what the AASHTO design procedure was the AASHTO method was how it was developed. Temperature, they developed a curve for various elastic moduli, which would be obviously be temperature dependent. And again, if you go back and let's suppose you're doing your UE design, you're doing your design and you go back to your UE notes, you may see a lecture you have used a structural coefficient for asphalt of A1 of 0.44. And without understanding what that 0.44 means, you may start to use the designs for Trinidad, use that same coefficient in Trinidad, and that is not applicable. You have to look at what the temperature of the asphalt is subjected to, determine what the elastic modulus range may be, and then select a structural coefficient appropriate to that. So I think that is where I have seen a lot of young engineers, myself included, when I now graduated.
Right.
A lot of young engineers went off track with that. Is when I did my master's degree and I had to read some research papers. I actually went into depth into that aspect of it, and I realized, okay, well, I saw what the error of my ways were, and I have fixed that. And when I am dealing with the young engineers and any engineer, it doesn't matter whether it's within where I work or anybody I talk to, we discuss it. I share that knowledge with them in terms of, you need to look at this, because using the wrong coefficient would result in a pavement structure which may not support the load conditions that you're expecting, and will have a shorter design life. So whereas you're expecting to have a pavement design life of, which is typically 20 years, using the wrong structural coefficient may result in a pavement design life of 7 years, 8 years. And then you have the public wondering, but they just built this road a few years ago and now it's deteriorating. So
Right,
again,
quite right.
you have to look at the design methods that you're using and ensure that you understand under what conditions design methods will develop, and then you apply it to your situation in Trinidad and Tobago. That's something that I have seen.
So this is actually quite an important point, Adish, because I know that people have reached a level of pure frustration with the roads, right? The condition of the roads, and understandably so. We all use roads, so we know. Now, one of the challenges that engineers have is that, just like you, we all have the technical knowledge. And then we have to try and find a way to translate that to the public, to the guy I shouldn't say guy, but the person in the street who is not aware of like these things we talk about, elastic moduli and so on. And so my question, before I move on to Rakesh, is in putting it into non-technical terms, then we will say, well, do you agree with that? So I'm going to make a statement. Do you agree that the design brief and design criteria is integral to the longevity of the road structure in our country?
Yes, I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean, again, is having that design criteria, design criteria established at design say, and adhering to it. It is integral to the design and the longevity and contributed to the longevity of the infrastructure. Correct.
So moving on to Rakesh now, I want to continue on this design brief before we move on to another topic. And your question really is, you are the president of the Construction Management Institute of Trinidad and Tobago. You are also a contractor by nature. Your training has been in contracting. And that is why this mix this afternoon was actually appropriate. Adish has spent most of his life in consultancy. I should say most of his technical or engineering life. I have spent most of my life in all roles, design, contracting at some point, and no clients. And you, Rakesh, you have spent most of your life in contracting, and you also have been involved in a lot of road projects. Is there any merit to someone in public saying the contractors at fault building bad roads? What is your take on
that? Well, the answer to that would be twofold, Don, because yes, we would want to believe that the contractor is most of the times honest and is executing the work in accordance with his quality assurance team in terms of the scope of works, etc. But we cannot leave it just up to the contractor to manage himself and to provide quality assurance over himself. And part of the challenge is that sometimes you have the persons who are supervising the contractor. They themselves may not be technically qualified and trained in order to manage these type of works, right? So in that light, you have a certain level of quality assurance that you would leave to the contractor himself to provide, but that isn't always the case. So you would have the contractor executing the work in terms of the scope that you provide, and that is what he's hired to do basically. Once he implements the scope of works, then he is okay with that. On the other hand, you have contractors who would take it upon themselves to do their internal quality testing, etc., to make sure that they deliver a quality product. So you have a mix where you would have some contractors being responsible and taking the necessary steps to ensure that the quality that is required. And on the other hand, you have some contractors who will deliver to what you tell them that you want. And it depends on that document that you contract them to do, whether that is scoped properly, there's a proper design for the roadway in that document. And basically, once they execute that, it will be done in accordance with their standards, but the client themselves also need to provide that level of supervision and quality control over that contractor. And in a lot of cases, we're seeing that that isn't the situation. And hence, we're seeing a lot of roads failing prematurely because it isn't being supervised properly. All right.
Right. So, all right. Sorry. Go ahead, Rakesh. Sorry.
That the supervision being a very important part. But if a contractor is hired and given a scope of works and execute the scope of works in accordance with your design and your scope, and the road fails, then in that case, on the client side, there's something wrong where that scope of works may not have been suitable to that particular road. Yeah?
Okay. So we have identified today that, and just to bridge now, I'll be talking about bridges, just to bridge the two conversations here, or the two contributions. You have to follow the design brief. We talked about that from the consultancy side that Adish represented. And then you're talking about construction, supervision, and quality. So there are three main issues there: design, construction, supervision, and quality. Now, anybody can answer this question. To the very frustrated public, of which we are part of the public, so we use the rules as well, and some level of frustration there. What can we then do to rectify some of these issues? And I'll explain what I mean. There's a particular road that was repaved in Charleville, right? On the eastern side of the highway city. And it probably wasn't more than a month or two ago it was repaved. And now there are depressions in the asphalt again. And you're seeing those, what we call in engineering, alligator cracks in the asphalt. And in the absence of any study or data on the road, what do you think might have most likely contributed to that again? Because this is one of the issues you see people complaining about all the time in areas in the country where roads have been, reached a state of disrepair. That contractors came in, they repave, and 2 months later, the road break up. So do you think it's any one of these three factors or any other factor that, is it a material factor as well? Or is it that, and this is where I get into the crux of the conversation. Do you think that we have unqualified contractors / constructors who are paving these roads, but not taking all of these things that you have identified, but both of you have identified into account, which is design, construction, supervision, and quality? Anybody can answer.
I would like to speak first on that before Rakesh. One thing we have to remember in Trinidad and Tobago, the majority of our secondary and tertiary roads were developed from footpaths, basically from when the Amerindians were here. They had footpaths and people put down, and even when they put down gravel, and then they put down some more gravel, and then they put down oil sand, or they put down some sort of surface dressing on it, and then it became a paved road, and that's basically how a majority of our secondary and tertiary roads developed. We have engineered roads in Trinidad where a design engineer sat down and did the required calculation and came up with the pavement structure design and the geometry, the vertical and the horizontal geometry, and we built those. We have roads like that, but the majority of roads were developed from footpaths, the alignments, and that's why you have some secondary tertiary have these sharp corners. It's not, if you go and apply designs, the current design standards from AASHTO to those roads wouldn't meet it in terms of radii of curves and things like that. So again, when we do these upgrades to the roads and we put asphalt on it and you widen the road, have you widened the foundation? If that is not done,
yes.
If that is not done, then the road is gonna prematurely fail at the edges, right? Because you don't have that support for the asphalt. You may see a nice asphalt surface going out, and I have seen contractors widen roads with asphalt, but I know there is the foundation there, and so said, so done. The road begins to crack at the edge. You get longitudinal cracks, and right. that's where you get the wheel loads. Because when you have two vehicles passing, they would obviously keep in the lane, and you have a wheel load close to the edge, and you don't have that foundation for the road there. At least the proper foundation, especially with these bigger trucks that we have on our roads now, these 10-wheeler, these 15 cubic meter trucks that are running on the roads. with heavy loads, and they're running on these secondary roads. Whether they're permitted to do that or not, I can't say, right? Because they're running on these roads, they're getting failure because you don't have the foundation to support the road. And I think that is what that's, and I wouldn't blame the contractor, because I have worked with inexperienced contractors, and once I have a contractor willing to listen to me, we will build it properly. As long as they're willing to listen to me and they're willing to accept, okay, I am inexperienced, I'm willing to listen to this person. I'm not telling him how to do his job, but I will advise them, okay, this is what we should do, this is what we need to do. Let us do this. And I mean, and it's in my interest. I don't, when I'm supervising a contractor, I don't sit down and say I'm the engineer and you're the contractor. It's everybody's a team. We succeed as a team, and we fail as a team. Yeah. And I don't want to fail. I don't like to fail. Right? When my supervisor critiques certain things, I have to, and when she does that, I can't say she never has a reason to critique the thing what she critiques, and I take it and I try to learn from it. Right? And again, if you work on an experienced contractor, as long as they're willing to listen to you, you could build it properly. And as it's designed properly, it will be built properly. But a lot of these things where you're seeing these roads being repaved, the asphalt is going out wider and wider, but you don't have the foundation, and it fails there. And once you get water infiltrating through those cracks, it just softens the subgrade, and it progresses inward. And then that's what you're having. And again, back to the design. These things progress from footpaths. You have this traffic load on it. Okay, we put an asphalt overlay. Is the overlay designed to support the intended traffic loading? Have they done a study to say, okay, this is the traffic loading on the road. We're going to overlay the road. We want the overlay to last 5 years, 7 years, however many years. What thickness of overlay do we need to put on this particular road? Are we aware of what the conditions below the existing asphalt are, what the layers are, what the existing strength is of the road, to be able to select an appropriate overlay? Right? And I think that's contributor to the problem. The next issue is whether or not the contractor is providing the product meeting the specifications, as was mentioned a bit earlier in terms of quality control plans. Right? Is the contractor testing the asphalt at the required frequency, or testing whatever material they use to construct the road? Or
testing at all.
Or testing at all. Is it being tested? Yeah. I think Rakesh talked about some contractors do in-house testing. Okay, fine. I have no problem with that. But is your equipment, are your items of equipment calibrated properly?
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
Yes, and you're
quite right, Adish. It's a chockload of things that the typical layperson in the street will not understand that goes into road design and construction. Now, of course, I have to focus on other things, but let me just get a quick contribution from Rakesh on those points, and then we're going to move on to bridges, and then after we're going to deal with floods. So I'll give equal amount of time to every topic, and then we'll have some other topics to talk about. So Rakesh.
Yeah, so the road that you're talking about, Don, I'm quite familiar with that road. During the construction, I even saw how things progress. The contractor is a experienced contractor, so I wouldn't say that the contractor is at fault in this case. What is the problem at that area? That road edge, one of the road edge borders, a very wide ravine, and that ravine is not developed, meaning it's an earthen ravine, right? And with the level of saturation that, because the ravine is no more than 4 to 5 feet away from the road edge, with the level of rainfall and saturation over time, and with the loading of the vehicles passing up and down there, that is a major contributor to why this road has prematurely failed, right? And on top of that, what I noticed is that they are now parking vehicles on the same side where you have the embankment failing, which is compounding the problem. So every time you pass there, and they even concrete a section of the embankment and parking vehicles on it because it's an industrial sort of area, and you have a lot of factories and stuff along there. And this is the reason why that road is at this point. But the real issue has to also boil back down to whether the design catered for drainage structures to be developed. And I believe it did. However, the funding allocated to these type of projects, let's say in the draft estimate, you would have had $100,000 allocated to the project and you get $50,000. Then are you going to build the drain or are you going to pave the road? So sometimes when the policy makers intervene, they would say, well, we're going to pave the road. And sometimes they go against the recommendation of the engineers or the technocrats. And this is a result of things like that, where you have these type of decisions being made. Yes, you paved the road, but look at the situation now. Yeah, because we all know the life of a road is basically deals with proper drainage and a proper base. And once you have that in place, then your road will tend to last its time in terms of the design life, etc. But that is a major contributor to why this road has prematurely failed.
So I agree with you, and I want to stick a pin in that whole conversation on engineers being told by being instructed by non-engineers. We're going to leave it for the end of the seminar. So I want to move on to bridges, right? Bridges. So the question for bridges is that we are seeing evidence of potential bridge failure in the country. I think there was one bridge that in the last several months completely washed away, and then there was another where the slab tends to be failing. So the question I would ask on bridges is that I know that at some point in time, colleagues of mine were involved in bridge inspections. Are you aware of whether these inspections are continuing or not? That is the question, the first question. Anyone?
Well, actually speaking to a colleague today, bridge inspections and bridge inspectors, they need to do their routine checks, right? However, once they submit their report on the bridge, whether or not, and more times there isn't the necessary funds allocated under maintenance to have the bridges maintained as they should. So that is part of the challenge in terms of where it comes to having the report done on the bridge itself through the inspectors and translating that into some sort of maintenance strategy or program to have the bridge routinely maintained.
Arish, what is your take, I would say, on bridge design as it relates now to bridge longevity?
Well, again, it comes back to the first thing you have to determine is what volume of water the bridge has to accommodate. And again, if with these older bridges, when they were designed, okay, they would have been designed to a certain design standard. If it's AASHTO or the British standard from the that we used before, did they in their design take into account the level of development that we're seeing in terms of houses and roads and where you have the soil, what was soil before becoming an impermeable surface, and you have a higher volume of runoff into these channels, and you have these bridge structures having to try and accommodate these higher levels of water passing through, where they're basically touching the soffit of your bridge or even overtopping the deck. And if your entry structures to the bridge are not designed properly, you can get the water going behind the bridge abutments, undermining the bridge and undermining the approaches to the roads, and undermining the bridge foundations themselves. That could be an issue. As I had mentioned, one of the bridge washing away, my first thing was what volume of water was the bridge designed to accommodate, and after this length of time, are those conditions, are the design criteria that which were adopted for that bridge design, are they still valid now, right? Has the bridge, has the conditions changed such that we need to look at replacing that bridge with one where you have which can accommodate a greater flow of water underneath it? An example I will give right now is that my employer had designed and we supervised the construction of a bridge in Claxton Bay, and when the span of our bridge was, I think it was probably close to probably 19 meters, I think, 18 or 19 meters. I may be off, but by a few meters. But that was the span, and and that was done under the Ministry of Works and Transport, that design. And downstream of our bridge, another bridge was done by the local government. This is the same river, and their span was much lower. And when we had heavy rains, the channel backed up at that bridge. The water backed up to our bridge, and it never overtopped our bridge. Again, I mean, I'm not talking about my employer, but we designed. We obviously looked at the rainfall conditions and designed for whatever design rainfall event was. But the water was touching. I mean, the water was almost touching the soffit of our bridge, and it shouldn't have been touching that, because we designed the bridge to accommodate what they call a freeboard, where there's a certain distance between the the highest water level, and the underside of your bridge. But this water was almost touching the soffit of our bridge, and the man on the street will watch that and say, "But look at them fellas, they don't know what they're doing." The water almost
and that is the thing, design engineers. You see, what people may not understand, the general public, is that engineers have to consider a lot of things in the design of roads and bridges, right? And it's not just related to the volume of water, as you rightly said. It's also your soil conditions. Some bridges, I saw there was an article where they said some bridges missing wing walls. Wing walls are important, of course, to ensure that soil is retained as behind the bridge or where the abutment is. You don't want the abutment soil washing away and undermining. And so the question now for Rakesh is, if I were to ask Rakesh, I say, Rakesh, what is the proper way to repair a pothole? Give me it step by step, because there's been a lot of discourse. And we're talking about design again, and design is so important. And Adesh's contribution so far has been all towards proper design, which I absolutely support, right? But there's been a lot of discourse of how a pothole should be repaired, whether it's from a layman in the street, somebody went on Wikipedia and read it, or engineer. Tell me, Rakesh, what is the proper way to repair a pothole? I think this is good knowledge for the public.
So just before I answer that question, Don, I just want to touch on something with bridge for 1 second.
Sure, of course.
That bridge was constructed in 1873, right?
What are you talking about?
Caroni River Bridge.
Okay, fine.
And whether or not who it was designed by, in terms of, we're talking about in 1873,
Right.
The relation is with the technology in 1873 and today, and that bridge lasted for 134 years because it was decommissioned in 2007, right?
Okay.
So the last 134 years, and there was significant changes in terms of traffic conditions, additional loading, increased volume of water, etc. So the point is, once it is designed properly with the projection for future use, it will stand the test of time and the design life. I don't know if Adesh would, I'm sure Adesh would agree to that. But yes.
I agree to that. But I mean, one thing I've learned with design of drainage structures, one question, I mean, you can do all the analysis you want. One important thing is go and talk to the people in the area and ask them, what's the highest flood level you have ever seen? Show me on your wall, and let them point it on the wall. And you get your survey, and you get them to survey an elevation on that. And you talk to a few people. What's the highest water level you ever saw on your property? Show me where it is, and get your surveys and compare that to what your analysis, your theoretical analysis are showing to see whether or not, okay, we are designing for the correct high water level.
Well, that training that Adesh talking about, both of us had that training from Mr. News, right? And I actually said that in the article on flooding this week in the Express. And Mr. News told me that so many years ago, and that concept is very much true. You speak with the residents first, they will give you some historical data, and then you marry that into your theoretical underpinning, as they say, or your design brief, or how you do your design calculations. And that is what I think is something is probably absent in some cases. You know, some engineers would go, I mean, when I was a young engineer, I made those mistakes. I would go gung-ho into a design and don't talk to anyone. But as an engineer, you need to talk to people. So I've advocated for that as well in the Express article, where I said, we need to talk with our residents, those who have been severely affected by floods and the road conditions that they're experiencing. and let them give it that historical perspective. So quite supported. Now, getting back on the topic of the proper way to repair a pothole. Let me hear Rakesh. Rakesh, what is the proper way to repair a pothole?
Right, so
Step by step, give it to us.
in a pothole, we're talking about an asphalt road here, correct?
Correct.
So first step is you would want to at least saw cut your asphalt and make sure you have a properly squared hole, where a square or rectangular shaped hole. In terms of, you also want to ensure that you have some sort of dry conditions when you're doing this repair because of the nature of the materials you're going to be using. You analyze your base material that is existing, and you obviously would have to remove and replace some of what is there with the proper compaction into that pothole. Whether or not you're going to do some level of testing to make sure that you have your nuclear density tester to make sure that you have the right density with the material that you are repairing the hole with, you do that, right? And then you apply your tack coat or your prime coat before you repeat your wearing course over that pothole itself. And again, the stress here is also on having proper conditions, because this is what I personally have seen happening, where the way that we do repair, and this is, I am assuming, ministry personnel, where you put the crusher on or the base material into the hole, you leave it there for a few days, you let the vehicles drive up and down on it, they provide the compaction.
I've seen it.
You come when the rain is falling, you apply a tack coat, and then you put asphalt over it. This is what I have observed happening. Next day you pass, there's a big depression where the patch is itself, right? Now, to me, that created a significant health and safety challenge, because a lot of people are now going down into that hole and they can lose control. So with that repair methodology, if it is not done properly, then you create a worse situation. And just to put a little humor into it, I have also seen holes being repaired by the Arangwes Taxi Association on Arangwes Road, and they are using concrete, unreinforced concrete, to repair these roads. I believe that is an illegal act for a member or members of the public to be repairing the state asset, right?
Right. So, I mean, I've seen that in the papers, and the thing is, I know it's, well, I don't know the law exactly on that, but I hear you. I know they are attempting to do a good, but in attempting to do the good, they do, and out of pure frustration, because I saw the interviews with the Arangwes Taxi Association. In attempting to do good, the problem is now concrete is not what you consider flexible pavement, okay? And we don't really have concrete roads in fact, what concrete is used, if I've seen it in some places, is they have concrete as a foundation in lieu of base course and surface, and then they asphalt over it, okay, like for driveways and such. But what they've been doing is filling the potholes with concrete. And you know what happens with dynamic loads on that? It's unreinforced, and the concrete is not in the same, as Adish might say, elastic modulus as the surrounding asphalt, the substrate. And so what happens after, in long story short, the concrete cracks and it comes out of the hole. And so I have also observed those areas where that methodology is used with putting the material in the roads and letting the traffic compact it. We all know about compaction and what you need to have as a proper proctor density and so on. But that brings up a question for either you or Adish, or probably Adish, which is, you've given us the proper way to repair a pothole, okay? And something we talked about earlier is about that bridge that lasted 134 years or so, right? There's always this discussion in Trinidad that what the Americans built in terms of the bases and the roads and the buildings, they are outlasting some infrastructure which has been built in the last 10 years, last 5 years, or even last year. So the question is, why would that infrastructure built in Trinidad by the Americans in during the wartime, why would it have still lasted so long? For example, Waller Field. Okay.
Well,
why do
one
roads
thing
are still generally, what is your take on that, Harish?
one thing you have to remember is that those things that were built by the Americans were during the war. Failure of the infrastructure during the war is not an option. Failure is
Right.
not an option. You have to have your bombers and your fighter planes and your army trucks or whatever it is. They have to be able to get to where they need to get to go to, and therefore it's possible in terms of at that point in time they may have over-engineered. They may have over-engineered it, or they may have done proper quality control. They may have done proper quality control. But I mean, we did some concrete cores on the runways in Waller Field, and our core samples, if I remember correctly, a core sample that was taken on concrete that had been laid down probably from 1940 something or 1930 something showed a compressor strength of 45 plus megapascals. That's very high strength concrete.
It is very high. Yeah.
45 megapascals. I mean, concrete itself stops gaining any appreciable strength after 28 days. Right. So that shows you the level of engineering of when they engineered it, what they designed it for. Right. Again, failure is not an option. As I say, I wasn't involved in design, but it's possible they may have had some level of over-engineering to make sure that they don't have any failures, that their infrastructure is always available at all times. Right? Again, I mean, a lot of. I mean, just to go back to this pothole thing, and as what I mean, I really want to say something on it. What really disappoints me is that the ministry has a detailed patch repair specification. And it basically what Rakesh had talked about there is basically covered in that specification about saw cutting it, taking out the material, putting back in material, compacting it to a certain level, putting back your prime or your tack coat and putting your asphalt and in terms of compaction. I mean, Rakesh talked about just filling back in the hole, but I actually saw. I mean, I sat down and watched a pothole repair, and it was an irregularly shaped pothole. But when you guys put the asphalt, they square the asphalt out. So it looked like a properly saw cut and squared out patch. When I sat down and watched it for myself. and I couldn't understand who they're trying to fool. And then I come back and
exactly. And that raises an excellent point, Harish. And it's something of a bit of embarrassment. The Americans built these roads so long ago in World War time. And it outperforming our roads. And the question, therefore, should be, should we then, because there's a philosophy in maintenance, right? That if you spend the correct amount of funding upfront to produce a high-quality construction, then the O&M or operational maintenance cost to the life of the particular asset will be less. And therefore, your overall life cycle costs will be reduced. And I think that we are just not doing that in Trinidad. We need to consider that we have national assets, which, by the way, roads affect the economy. This is something we all learned in engineering, that the efficiency of your infrastructure determines your economy, right? And if we don't have national assets which are lasting the time that it's supposed to last, then it comes into this very abusive cycle that every 2 or 3 years we have to be repaving the same roads over and over again. And of course, the taxpayers, of which we all are paying taxes, all of us are taxpayers, it's just not effective for us. So perhaps that is why I brought up that point about the American roads, that perhaps we should consider putting in infrastructure with the correct funding, and Rakesh alluded to that, the correct funding now, so that we don't have to be repaving roads all the time. And the question now is so I want to switch gear a little bit, unless Rakesh had another contribution on this before I switch gear.
As you're on the US and their infrastructure, Roosevelt Highway, that was built it started in 1941 and was completed in 1942, only a few months to get that constructed. So that road is over 80 years old, that highway. And even there's a lot of infrastructure that they built in the Chaguaramas area. And up to today, the concrete shows no spalling or no signs of any sort of failure. So I believe that they would have had good engineering together with quality control to ensure that the structures that they built would stand the test of time. And we need to adopt some of these standards and pay a little more attention to assigning or allocating the right amount of funding rather than half of what is required to build the road or build the bridge or build the building, and trying to make that work. It just cannot happen. And I think that has been happening for the years leading up to now, and we've seen the results of it. Everything is everything is failing, and
Correct. We're reaching the end of life for some of these assets.
Some of these are at the end of their life. I mean, it's some premature failure of what has been built in the recent past.
Right. And in fact, I've seen an excellent comment online, so I'm going to read out. It's from Reshma Ramtran, who we all know. She works at Trinidad. So I just wanted to read this comment from Reshma. The roads are an asset of the taxpayers, and the state is charged with the responsibility to maintain them, which they are not doing. The taxpayers cannot be faulted for fixing their roads. Okay, so that's an excellent comment. It is a particular view, and I could partially agree with that. So thank you, Reshma, for that. So I love to talk about the maintenance. So I want to switch gears now because we have about an hour again. So I wanted to spend the next half an hour on the famous topic of floods, and then the last half an hour on things like procurement policy going forward, the real crux of the matter. So let's spend another half an hour on floods. Now, it is obvious that, and I spoke about it this week in the Express contribution, but of course, I want to hear your take on it. And let's talk about floods in terms of, I would remember that a few years ago, maybe 10 years ago, when you used to hear about floods, it was like in St. Helena, right? Carrying River break its bank, St. Helena flooded. Now you're having floods almost in every part of the country for several reasons. One could be poor maintenance of the drain. Two, some of the drains in disrepair. It could be climate change. It could be simply that we've had a lot of development. We're not taking into account how much water has gone into the ground or onto the surface and so on. So we all know the reasons why floods are happening. So let's hit the real crux of the matter with floods. Short-term solutions, I had mentioned cleaning the drains, repair. What, in your estimation, is the challenge with those short-term solutions? And let's start with Adesh again this time. We need to maintain our drains. What do you think is the challenge with that?
Well, it comes back to whether or not they're being cleaned properly, cleaned regularly. I mean, again, when you have these covered drains, when they remove the manholes and they clean, are they really cleaning it properly? How effective is it? How are we checking that? How effective is that? I know sometimes they build box drains. They like to build these concrete box drains. And do they even do an analysis as okay? So we have this concrete box drain conveying water away from the area at a faster rate now. So crossing below a road. Was it crossing designed to accommodate that increased volume that's coming down now because of the box drain, and then you have it backing up there, and it backs up along the drain, and it floods. So I mean, you can clean the drain all you want. Have we done a proper overall analysis of when we do these isolated type of upgrades? What's the impact downstream? Because you may put a box drain that may convey water away from an area faster, but when it reaches a culvert crossing or a bridge crossing that cannot accommodate it, you're going to get back up and you're going to come right back to the same place I was flooding before you build that box drain. Yeah. It comes back to whether or not we are doing a proper overall analysis of what is required in a particular area rather than doing ad hoc upgrades to the infrastructure. And how do they impact on what's happening downstream?
Yeah, in fact, one of the things I do whenever, like some of the media articles that came out on some of my contributions, I remember the first one on flooding, and I think I shared this with Rakesh. There's a lot of social media links for me on that, right? And one person remarked, and I remember the comment, that we have to deepen all the drains. What is this guy talking about? This is meaning now. What are you talking about? You have to deepen the drains. So I said that deepening the drains, and this is coming back into alignment with your comment, Adesh, is you're going to deepen the drains, and then you're not creating a drain, what you're creating is detention ponds in your drains, because you're now deepening the drains and you're not looking at the outfall and the grades and all those things. The idea of a box drain is to collect water and get it out quickly, which is why we always talk about time of concentration. I mean, I heard the minister talk about time of concentration. I don't want to really go into attacking the minister, but time and concentration has to be taken into account into how fast you could get the water out. So where's all the take on that? We start with Rakesh and then I'll come back to Adish on that.
Just to touch on cleaning up drains, Don, you see the way that sometimes the corporations clean drain, they take out from the drain and they put it on the road. And that is left on the road and everybody drive over it and create a health situation. Also, when rain falls, the same silt goes back into the drain. And time again, you see this happening everywhere. And I mean, how could we accept in 2022 these type of practices? One, it is for the public. It's a public health concern. And you're not removing or you're not creating any solution, because when rain falls, it goes directly back into the drain. At one point in time, there was something called silt bags, where you put it into the bag, allow it to drain off, and then you pick it up the next day. But it cannot be there for weeks. And, you know, that is a real cause of concern that, you know, it shows the level of thinking of people. I mean, are we really wanting to help the situation or solve the problem? In terms of the drainage infrastructure and developments, you have a lot of developments happening everywhere. And you would maybe have a 2x2 box drain leaving that development. And meters down the road, it enters into an earthen 1x1 drain. So that makes absolutely no sense, right? It's a recipe for flooding. So analysis of approving these developments, one has to consider where the outfall point is going to be. And if you are given approval for that development, that drain should be constructed to the outfall, which should have a bigger capacity of what is leading to it, right? Whether that is considered, we are not sure, but the drainage division together with town and country planning should be collaborating at that level with the corporation in order to ensure that these kind of things happening. Another aspect of what we should be looking at is, how do we follow development within our regional corporation? They usually follow a strategic plan, right?
Right.
That strategic plan on a macro level has to be built out. Now, if each corporation has a strategic plan that is being followed to some level, we would know what is the net runoff eventually that will be coming into the main rivers.
Correct.
So this has to be really integrated in order for us to really deal with flooding in any meaningful way, right? But you would have sometimes 3 years pass, 5 years pass, and the entire strat plan has changed.
Correct. And that is one of the things I said as well. Yes, quite right.
We need to pin down and say, okay, we are in 2022 have an idea of what our net runoff is going to be in 2025. So we could improve this culvert here. We could improve this river mouth here. We need to desal the river, but in a particular way, all the way to the mouth of the river, because basically we create a retention, as you say. If it is medians do not match the outfall, then you're creating a bigger problem. And we see it happening when the tides are now at high level, the water has nowhere to go. And for 2 days, no rain is falling, but yet you have places flooding because of the high tide. So these are the kind of things that we have to pay particular attention to. And the other thing to that is I want to touch on that is coming down in these rivers. In the old Caroni post office area, there was about 1 million bottles, plastic bottles collected there. People actually volunteered to start taking out these plastic bottles. And again, in 2022, we are a society that there is no drive to recycle a meaningful way, because if you separate your plastics, where are you going to put it? It's going in the same garbage truck that is passing. Let us say a garbage truck for each municipal corporation to pick up plastic costs $1 million. The net benefit that will have is so significant,
Yes. Thank you very much, Rakesh.
I mean, just
Yeah.
Rakesh kind of touched on with the drains and the developments, but I mean that's the desilting of the rivers. Again, you have all these long reach excavators desilting river, and they're putting everything on the river bank, and then they go, and a rainy season comes, and everything just basically washes back into the same channel that they desilted. So it's a kind of vicious cycle we're going through right there.
Yeah,
with respect to the recycling, I think even the culture of Trinidad, we as Trinidadians, we don't appreciate our environment. We just litter and we don't care. I mean, you're seeing that, and a lot of that. I mean, okay, you could put as much bins as you want, but Trinidadians, they throw stuff out their car. I mean, if I drink something in my car, I throw it on the floor. When I reach home, I put it in the dustbin. If I reach somewhere else, then go to the dustbin. But I have seen people throw stuff out the window, and if you go and talk to them in kind of society right now, you probably get shot. So people.
No, that's true. And
hesitant to look out. They only say, "Well, I just seen about what I have to see about." I'm not going to tell that man anything. I'm not going to tell that lady anything.
No, you're right. So several. Wait, Rax. So you're right. Wait, please. Let me just read this comment. Now, there's a comment online. Mr. Lutchman, if you're listening, I have to abridge some of that part of that comment because I don't want to be accused of encouraging any slander or libel, right? So I'll read some part of the comment, which is, we need an independent body called a Roads Authority with engineers from the US, UK, with some local engineers, both from UE and the APET. Another comment he made was the authority would set the standard issues, updates, inspect and qualify, disqualify contractors. Taxpayer dollars wasted in making contractors billionaires. That, all right, fine, that didn't call anybody's name. All jobs awarded to contractors must be accompanied by a performance bond, which could be released in tranches over a 5-year period. Each year, the road remain intact, 20% is released. All right, let me comment on that. Let me take that comment, Mr. Lutchman. Now, I don't share the view that we necessarily need an independent body, and especially with engineers from abroad. I have advocated for this time and time again that we have very competent engineers in Trinidad and Tobago. They are coming out of the universities. Of course, they need the necessary training and guidance to become experienced engineers. So I think all our engineers who have studied our country are familiar with our country and all the conditions in the country. They are competent to help fix the country. So that is one. That is just a view I disagree with respectfully. In terms of standards and issues and updates and so on, there are mechanisms in the contracts, whether we're using the FIDIC contracts or any other type of contract, with the particular conditions and specs that will hold a contractor accountable for the work that they do when fixing the roads. The problem, Mr. Lutchman, is that and let's talk about that, but I was waiting for the end of the seminar to talk about, but the problem occurs if there's any form of potential corruption in the execution of the contract, whether it is acceptance of poor quality work for a favor or something else of that sort. So that I'm going to just park that issue and talk about procurement at the end of the seminar. In terms of the performance bond that all contractors must be accompanied by a performance bond, I think it would be fair to say that 90% of those medium to large scale contracts in our country, they do have a performance bond, but that is not the only mechanism we use to hold the contractor accountable. Sometimes as engineers, we don't really want to get to the performance bond where we have to call on it. We would prefer that we work with the contractor and ensure that they get the job in the right quality and within the right time and cost, right? So, but I take your suggestions online, Mr. Lutchman. So moving on now back to the flood discussion, I wanted to raise the issue of, and I raised this again in the Express article, but I just wanted to raise it here. I talked about the use of these outdated IDF curves, right? And because we see the impact of climate, the short burst high intensity rainfall. So I wanted to ask Adish, as a consultant / designer, how you all have accounted for that in the design, so that you might have to use the IDF curve from 1980.
No, well, I mean, I think to be fair to the Water Resources Agency, the last few requests we've made to them, they have given us some updated information.
Okay.
Right? We've been getting some more recent information. So again, you as a consultant, you can, even though you may have a library of intensity, duration, frequency curves, you need to do your own homework and check with the Water Resources Agency to see if they have any updated information, so that you are not using old information. What I would like to see though is that these state agencies that have possessions information, that they at least indicate online what's available in terms of dates, in terms of, so you can make it easy for you to check to see, okay, well, I need to update this information, right? We're not seeing. You basically have to go through and write to them, and then you have to wait for them to respond and all that. I think in this day and age, a lot of stuff, and I think with COVID, it kind of give us a kind of shake up a little bit, that we need to embrace the technology more and try and have information sharing, information sharing, information shared to the public, consultants, everybody have that. The state agency with this information have it been able easy to be shared with the public, where the public can access it easily. All right, there's a cost to it. Okay, fine. There is a cost to it, but at least you tell them this is what we have. This is the period for which we have it. Right. But again, from our recent some recent drainage things that we did, we got, when we made inquiry with Water Resources, because I mean we have some curves, and I said, look, let's check and make sure, see if there's anything more updated. We did get updated information from the Water Resources Agency. So,
but would you say, so all the curves are updated, or you're just thinking that some of the curves?
I can't say if all the curves are updated. I am not in a position to say that, but as I said, I know they are actively updating it. But I think also when you talk to them, I think also into the challenges in terms of the rainfall recording gauges, whether or not they're functional or not, that again comes back to asset maintenance and asset upgrading. We need to upgrade whether or not we do have enough rainfall recording gauges stationed throughout the country, Trinidad and Tobago, that will allow us to update these IDF curves with a high degree of confidence. Right, that I can't speak to that. I think, but I think that's something that I know that is a challenge to them.
No, and you're right. And so, what I would say there is that that is where the design starts. For your design of drainage, you need to know the intensity of the rainfall, or the rainfall design intensity that you're using. So the next question would be therefore, okay, we've had places that flood in Trinidad, so to be going into a little bit of the public concerns, right? At this point in time, the public is frustrated where they are saying, okay, we want this thing fixed, we want our drains fixed. We talked about roads, but we're doing only flooding now. We want this fixed. The short-term solution that Rakesh talked about, which I agree, is of course cleaning your existing drains, repairing them. But something we need to touch on is something I touched on as well, which was estuary infrastructure. You have seen in other parts of the world where at the high tide, they've developed infrastructure to allow a river to flow out during high tide. So you don't have that backwater, what we call backwater analysis, that backwater going all the way and causing the flood. We've also touched on the fact that we need to check the capacity of the rivers to see if they can take now all the water from new developments. And it's clear in my mind that all our major water courses and rivers obviously accepting more water than their cross sections or volume to take, the capacity. Because when you see them doing those dredging, they dredge just before a bridge, let's say, and just after. So the questions now is really, one, what are your views on estuary infrastructure? We'll start with Rakesh and then go back to Adish. And two, should we dredge along the entire river and recreate the cross-sectional profile, or just dredge where the bridges are? Because you'll dredge before, then you'll dredge right after, and then after the profile goes just back to its original. So Rakesh, take the one on the dredging, and then Adish could take the one on the estuary infrastructure. So Rakesh, you go on that, on the dredging.
So in terms of the dredging, right now the Caroni River, there was a project that was recently done just before the onset of the rainy season, where there's approximately 2 feet of one section of the bank that was remaining, all right? And with this type of rains that we're getting, if no work was done on it, definitely we would have had some flooding in certain parts of further down into the Caroni area. So definitely the dredging, it helps in order to get that water flowing. However, what is happening at this point is, based on the cross-sectional profile of how it was dredged, you find that there's a significant amount of erosion happening on both sides of the banks at this time. And as Adesh would have pointed out, some of the material is taken out and placed on top of the banks, and when the water level rises, it goes directly back into the river. So we need to pay closer attention. Yes, the rivers needs to be dredged and clean, but we need to pay a little more attention to, one, how the hydraulics of the river is behaving, especially around corners, because this is where you could have significant breaches, as in the incident of what is happening with parts of the Caroni River right now, where you have these 90-degree sort of corners. Rather than desilting those areas, we should be looking at rediversion so that you would prevent these meanders and eventually have things like oxbows forming. But
covering, yes, correct.
I know that they are definitely looking into rediversion of the sections of the Caroni River where you have these, because it just cannot handle the capacity, and there's significant erosion happening around the corners. So, and even part of the existing bank was touched, and that is creating a real situation where you have more and more erosion happening. Rather than touching the existing bank, because we know that that is made of some clay type material, we really need to pay attention to the hydraulics of how the river is behaving. And the Caroni River is not a new river. None of these rivers have been existing over time. So why not have a preventative approach towards it rather than being reactive? 2 weeks before the onset of the rainy season, we shouldn't be trying to fix a problem to prevent flooding if we get a significant amount of rainfall. So we really need to be have a proactive approach in terms of how we plan to dredge these rivers. And your question about the points where we have bridges, we goes from a wide back to obviously it have flow constriction there, but I think cleaning of the sides with the amount of debris over time, the amount of growth over time, plays a significant role in actually getting the water out. In terms of the Caroni River exiting into the Caroni Swamp, a video was done recently where they showed that there's a number of trees that has fallen into secondary channels into the swamp itself. They are impassable. The Ministry of Agriculture has a very limited amount of funding, and they are trying to assist with cleaning, but it has a little more effort is needed to get that Caroni Swamp and the tributaries clean so that they could have free flow of water out into the sea, especially at the river mouth. We know that that area is very sensitive in terms of the ecology and the habitats there. So we need to pay attention to that, but some sort of cleaning is required within that area to get the water flowing.
Yeah, and all excellent points, especially with the point of the bank preservation. But so essentially I agree with me that you need to maintain the entire cross section and redefine it. Now, you talk about the Caroni Swamp, and then that feeds into the question that I'm asking Adesh now, which is estuary infrastructure. Okay, we've seen the use that in the Netherlands. What is your take, Adesh, on implementing that kind of infrastructure in Trinidad? Because clearly they have said that obviously when there's a high tide, the flow slows down and so on. So what is your take on that? What is your design take on that, I should say?
Well, okay. from a technical point of view, I mean, if it works in Netherlands, we can see whether or not it's able to work in Trinidad. But again, it's one thing to go on, we spend the money, we put out the capital cost for this infrastructure. But if we don't maintain it, what happens? Right? I mean, just to go back to something what Rakesh was talking about, and I think Don, your newspaper article basically covered, is that I think it all really comes back to we need a proper national drainage plan for the country.
Thank
right? which will establish, and again, come back to what Rakesh is saying, is that okay, what is required along each of these major channels. I mean, I'm sure everybody's been hearing about this Mamral Dam for decades.
Oh yes.
Again, yes. I guess Mamral Dam came up again recently, and what has come out? What was the latest with that? I mean, I am not aware of what's the latest with it, but I mean, you always hear this Mamral Dam will help alleviate the flooding that you're seeing in the Caparo River Valley Basin, and as well as downstream of there in the Sugarland series. That Mamral Dam is supposed to help alleviate some level of flooding there. But what's going on with that? I mean, how is that tied into our national drainage plan? And that you need to do that. But I think what we don't do in this country is maintain our assets. So it's one thing to go and build all these things, which could help alleviate, I wouldn't say solve, but alleviate flooding issues. But if we don't maintain it, we're back to square one. We're in the same position, right? It comes back to this, it's basically we do not maintain our infrastructure, roads, bridges, drainage infrastructure. We do not maintain our infrastructure, and that is one of the biggest problems, right? So
actually an excellent point.
You could go and adapt whatever technology you want. You could go and do stabilization of your subgrade or whatever it is. You could go and get these estuary infrastructure at the river mouths that allow the river to flow out into the sea during high tides and eliminate the backwater effect. Right? You could do all that, but if you don't maintain it, if you don't protect it, what happens? Right? There's this Port of Spain flood alleviation study that I mean. It was, I don't know where they've reached with that. I know they've implemented some things in that, but what's the status of that? I mean, how is John Public being kept updated in terms of what the current government, whatever current government is, what are they doing in terms of dealing with these matters? Right? I mean,
no, you're right, and that is some of the issues we're going to talk about in the next 10 minutes.
One thing I realize is that what is not maintenance of infrastructure is not glamorous. You can't cut a ribbon for maintenance. You could cut a ribbon for a new black road. But you can't go and cut a ribbon for if you seal cracks in a road, which will give it another 5 years before you have to come and overlay it. That's not glamorous, and that doesn't get you any voter points. So
no, you're right.
Glamorous, and maintenance doesn't get the funding allocation it needs.
No, quite right. And something that also that Rakesh mentioned earlier is that we have not considered what is the silt load in these rivers from either legal or illegal quarrying. That's one. There's a comment I remember reading online in relation to maintenance that I guess the older folks would know that currently 1975 Limited used to maintain a lot of the back roads and some of the drainage in these areas. And so in those days, those things were kept under check. So it comes back to that very essential point. And for John Public who is listening, or Jane Public who is listening, and for media colleagues, that is one of the points we have to get across: maintenance. You see, if we the cycle of maintenance. If we don't catch maintenance at the correct timing, one, your maintenance cost is going to get increasingly higher every year, because every year and it's the same thing with roads, bridges, and our water courses. We need to do inspections, have annual inspections. In fact, I was calling for a report card because they use it in other countries to rate infrastructure, so you know exactly what grade A means, grade B, and that kind of thing. And then what you do is you gear your plan towards the maintenance of this particular asset. But if you're not maintaining it, then it will continue to degrade and decline. And I think that is where we have arrived in the country with all our infrastructure, that the roads have now degraded to a point where they require rebuild rather than repair some of these roads. The water courses are failing because you need to rebuild, as Rakesh is saying, you have 90-degree, is that what they're saying? 90-degree meanders, and so on. So you have scouring erosion. And maintenance is where the funding, and we talked about funding a lot, and now we're going into that portion of the seminar, which is the final half an hour, where we're going to talk about really the policy, the national issues. We've talked a lot about technical today, but before I get into that, I just have 2 comments to read. One is from Mr. Lutchman again. If the contractors are rated, even if substandard work is allowed to be remediated, the contractor rating should be revised, amended. I assume he's talking about performance. And I will deal with that in the procurement side of the discussion we're going to have in the next few minutes. From Mr. Christopher online, significant clay material in south and central areas, agreed. And I think he's talking about the expansive clay. Should we create areas of detention? Oh, so there's a question. Should we create areas of detention ponds and oversized drains to handle intermittent excess runoff? Who wants to take that question?
No, I think it's a idea that should be considered. But again, it comes back to that national drainage plan. That is where they would look at those sorts of matters in terms of solutions to issues. But obviously, detention ponds, they want to design them properly. They will serve their function. Just to give an example of one thing, when Rakesh made reference to a 90-degree bend, you may think, well, okay, let's go and kind of put a curve, a more gentle curve, a curve with a large radii to remove that 90-degree bend. But one thing you have to look at again is you may do that there, but when you do that bend, you increase the velocity of water in the river and you cause a problem further downstream. So this national drainage plan is a very important thing to guide how we deal with these drainage issues in Trinidad. You're looking at the country as a whole. You look at rivers along the entire length in terms of, okay, we don't just straighten out this part here, but you look at when you straighten out this part, the increase in velocity, how is it affecting what's downstream? How is it going to negatively affect it? What do we need to do to mitigate against those negative effects? Because I worked with Dr. Gyan Shrivastava on something, a study where a client wanted to remove two bends from a river, and I think the client itself was you have to give credit to our client that they didn't just want to straighten out the river. They said if we straighten out the river, what are the implications? They want to look at that, and the implications were if we straighten out the river in those areas to facilitate their whatever development work they were doing, these are the implications downstream. So we may have straightened out the river where they had to do their work, but as part of that, we didn't just straighten it out in the design. We also introduced curves further downstream, which back down the water. So the net effect in terms of velocity was almost zero, right? These are things you need to look at it. So you have to look at it as a whole. You can't just look at a particular location and just solve that in isolation. There is always an effect somewhere downstream or upstream on what you're doing, and you need to be aware of that. I come back to, as I think Rakesh was talking about, these development plans. I mean, I had worked with a land use planner probably around 2007, 2008 on some spatial development plans for certain regional corporations, right? I don't know. I mean, we just did certain parts related to the civil engineering aspect of it, but I don't know where those plans have reached. Are they being implemented? Are they being reviewed? Because this is what we do in 2022, so as 15 years later, right? Are those plans still? Are they still even valid? What was the plan for the country? It comes back to what's the plan for the area? How is that going to contribute to the runoffs into these water channels? And what do we need to do to have these channels be able to convey the flow and minimize flooding? Right? Do we need to? I mean, I went to a seminar that I think a consultant had put on through APET. And I mean, they were talking about if you need to increase the more effective way rather than deepening your channel is to go wider. You get better capacity, a better capacity in terms of capacity improvement if you go wider. But if you go wider now, when you come to a bridge crossing, a channel crossing, you can have a constriction there. You also have to do upgrades to that channel crossing for this wider channel profile, right? These are you have to look at all these things.
So before I switch gears, another comment from, which is very, very excellent comment here from Rishma. Considering the lack of maintenance in designing results in a more expensive design to taxpayers. There are departments in charge of maintenance, so why is maintenance in this country such a problem? So that supports that comment from Rishma. Thanks, Rishma, for that comment. That comment definitely supports exactly what we're talking about. What is the, so I'm going into this is the part of the seminar now, the last half an hour, we get into the real exciting areas of maintenance. So I want to dovetail Rishma question to this question I'm going to ask. And this is where the tough questions come in, because you see technical, I always say, you guys good at technical, your experience, you're qualified. So now we're going into the real meat of this matter. Why it is that our maintenance appears to be tied in, and I'm saying appears, to be tied in with this 5-year political system. Why is it not? Because like in the States, you have the federal government, which we could very well call the local government here. But why is maintenance not continuous over a longer period of time and it changes on 5 years? Who want to take that question?
I can't take that question, Rondon. That's a loaded question you're asking. Give me
a loaded potato. Go ahead.
No, it comes back to our political maturity, whether or not we really see the country, the question asked me whether our politicians really have the country's interest at heart or their individual interests. That's the question that has to be asked. And from what you have said there, where the maintenance seems to be have a 5-year horizon, that itself is the answer, right? There's more individual interest than the country's interest.
Yeah,
that's the way I see it. I mean, I come back to, like I had talked about earlier, maintenance is not glamorous. It's not glamorous. You can't cut a ribbon for dredging a river for cleaning up.
Well, they probably could, but that's probably a way to do it.
But when you see the kind of money they spend for these ribbon cutting ceremonies, it's ridiculous. Why it is we have to go and cut a ribbon for opening a bridge? Why we have to spend money on that? Put money into doing that, money into at least upgrading some other piece of infrastructure there, right?
And this is, and before Rakesh, I know you want to go. Hold on, I'm going to stick this one to them. And I totally agree with you, Adish. We have become accepted, and I'm not talking about this regime. I'm talking about any regime that has gone into our Trinidad and Tobago national politics. We've accepted that opening a bridge, a school, or whatever is something premium. And in my opinion, it shouldn't be premium. Having a proper school, road, bridge, whatever, or building should be something that is standard for the development of our country. It is not something premium that we provide to our citizens. As taxpayers, we pay for that. And now, I know Rakesh has a lot of conversation to say that, so I'm releasing Rakesh like a floodgate here. Good.
Yeah, Don, thank you for that. In terms of maintenance, right? Let us put it into a perspective where for the next 5 years, if we were to get this things right and things functioning properly, we were only going to spend, based on the funds we have, we're only going to spend that in terms of doing maintenance to get it right so that things are fixed and things function. Are we going to do it and not do any new capital projects? Right? And the answer is it just would not be done because there is no mileage in terms of not having any new projects, any new roads paved, etc. But what we are experiencing today is not a today for today problem. This has been over the past 10 to 15 years where maintenance was always put on the back burner. And it was a point where, okay, whoever that they will deal with it. And now this is the point where we are, the breaking point, where there's a lot of things failing because of lack of maintenance. If we were to look at the local government system, where the funding that is allocated towards maintenance, you know that some of these corporations don't have money to buy road building materials. They don't have money to buy oil to fix these roads. And some of them depending on mill material to patch holes. I mean, can we really continue to operate like that? And because the starvation of the funds, maintenance should have higher priority than capital projects, because even the more that we build and the more that we add to the assets, then how is the maintenance? Obviously, the maintenance is going to increase proportionally, but
Correct.
reason we just don't focus on that at all, and we just build something. For example, look at the Chaguaramas boardwalk. Millions of dollars was spent on that project, and it just has deteriorated in a very short space of time. So in terms of maintenance, the project is handed over, but what next? So these are the kind of real discussions we have to have, yeah? And is monies and funds really being allocated to properly maintain, because it boils back down to the in-house staff of these regional corporations having the resources in terms of functioning equipment, functioning machinery, to the materials available to repair and to manage these sort of maintenance. Because even look at the recreational parks, some of them can't be maintained because the resources are just not there. And it's really a reflection of the society and the times that we're living in. Because, I mean, can you carry your child to one of the normal recreation grounds in a village or a community to, recreate? And the answer might be no. But yet we have these grounds well lit and nobody is using it. So it's a high cost to taxpayers, and maintenance is the answer in order for us to really move forward. And the allocation of proper funding towards it has to be looked at with some sort of seriousness now.
Sorry, Don, I'd like to add one thing. Okay, we talk about maintenance and assets, but I mean, you have to also look at the effectiveness of your maintenance strategies. How effective and what's the metric for measuring it? It comes back to what you need to do. You need to have a valuation of your assets on year zero, whatever year zero is. And every year you do a valuation of your assets. And if the value of your assets are increasing, your maintenance strategies are effective. And again, they need to have these systems put in place. You can't just say, okay, we're going to do maintenance, but we need to measure the effectiveness of the maintenance strategies. And how are you measuring it? I mean, what's the means for measuring it? One means for measuring it is valuing your assets, doing a valuation of your assets and seeing at the end of each financial year, what's the valuation on your assets, right? Is that being done? I mean, I can't say. I mean, I have not seen any discussion about that in the public domain. Right. This is something that is one thing to have maintenance, but it's one thing to make sure that your maintenance strategies are effective. And how are you measuring the effectiveness of it? Not by John Public saying we're looking good, or the politician cutting a ribbon or something. Is it a hard and fast method that anybody could scrutinize? Is your value of your asset? What's the value of your asset base?
Correct.
And you need to implement something like that.
So I don't want to. Oh yeah, sorry, Rakesh, you want to make a contribution?
Every year that we do a project, we are increasing the assets. And in some cases, the cadre of workers that are in these state agencies are decreasing every year because some are retiring. And whether or not they are being, hiring is happening to replace the persons that are leaving, then you have a shortage in terms of, okay, do we have enough personnel in-house now to repair these increasing assets? So there's some internal problems within the state agencies that also has to be fixed in order for these type of things to be really effective.
All right. So I want to move on to another one, something that is a passion of mine, something that you touched on. Now, we talk about the technical people at the state agencies, regional corporations, what have you. And I spoke to one young lady who was working in a regional corporation. She's an engineer. And she says that she's offering technical solutions and non-technical people are telling her, hey, what? We're not going to do that. And it frustrates her as a young engineer. So the question I have for you all is, there seems to be, when these issues crop up of floods, roads and bridges and whatnot, and you read some of these social media comments, which I tend to do. You look at persons who are saying, one, engineers, they don't know what they're talking about. Okay, fair enough. or they look at people who believe that they have the solution based on whatever they observe or whatever they have researched. What can we do, therefore? The question is, what can we do more as engineers to advocate for persons to really buy into what we say and not just, because some people have the view that engineers are corrupt, okay? That's just a general view. I remember some years ago I did a media article and a media interview, sorry, and I remember a comment was that this guy, meaning me, he's just looking for more money, right? So that's why, that was the time when the earthquake had happened, right? For the earthquake conference. So the question is, what can we do as engineers to get the public behind us to understand all of these things we are saying today, these important things about maintenance and design and using the right quality tools and so on. What can we do as engineers? Who wants to start?
Well, is it our professional bodies like AFET? Should they be more vocal? Should they put out each month put out a full page article on some relevant topic that affects the country, and what's happening, how it could be addressed, and put something out there, educate the general public in a layman terms. I mean, you don't want to put time of concentration and all that. I mean, you need to break that down for the layman to understand. Put it in a language that they can understand, because when you go and use that type of language, these people they think you're trying to talk down to them, right?
Agreed. I mean, totally agree and supported Adish, because I mean, I have said that to APET as well, and I don't want to obviously be accused of bad talking APET here, but I've said that to them, and I guess they have views on it. But you're right. You have the Law Association, you have the Contractors Association under Glenn. They do tend to make these kind of public statements. And I think engineers need to do a lot to, what we say, raise the profile of the profession so that we get the public to buy into what we say and get them to, basically to restore confidence that, listen, we're not trying to take the money, steal the money, we're trying to get taxpayers to spend more money. That the reason why we are advocating for these things is to get the public to understand there's a design philosophy, there's a construction philosophy, and if we do some of these things, we will have sustainable infrastructure. Rakesh, your take?
So I'll use the example of the structure of a regional corporation. So you have the board, which is basically the political arm or the council, and you have the administrative side, right? Now, the engineer will typically report to the CEO, right, who is the head of the administration. And the chairman would be the head of the board or the council. What we need to do is have the administrators and the CEOs take a more robust stance when it comes to the final decision making in terms of logical and transparent things that would make sense in order to implement for the overall betterment of the community and the region, right? The board is there to make policy and guide according to the policies. However, when it comes to the administrative matters, that is where the person in charge need to really have a sense of a strong personality in order to separate the two of them and to really make the decision of what is right and what is logical for the overall development of the region. So if we can make that distinction, it would help a lot in alleviating how we treat with projects and how projects are decided on, which ones we decide to do and which ones we decide not to do.
So you talk about prioritization, and I was also touching on that we need to listen to our technical people, right? I said that in the article that we need to listen to the residents, as Adish was advocating earlier, those who have the historical observation. And then we need to listen to the technocrats who will take the history from those persons who live in those areas with floods and so on. And then we translate it into design. So it comes on to this other idea I wanted to talk about, which is, of course, the use of technology. We've seen around the world, new machines for fixing potholes and so on. Why have we in Trinidad resisted, in your opinion? I say resisted, you could correct mistake. Why have we resisted importing these new types of technologies to get us where we want to be? And I'll say that in the context that when I had the earthquake conference some years ago, I had invited a young lady from England to speak. And she had developed a flood warning system that works with sensors in rivers and so on, right? So that it allows persons who live close to riverbanks or in flood zones to get out in time. And we've seen this year a lady lose her life in the flood, and I think last week saw a senior citizen lose their life. And that to me is very disheartening. So what can we do with technology? And why are we resistant, and what technology should we bring into the country?
Well, again, I come back to technology. I don't think we're resistant to technology. I mean, let's use your pothole repair machine. The military had a pothole repair machine at one point in time. Where is it right now?
Oh, I wasn't even aware of that. Go ahead.
They had an all-in-one machine that would excavate, and I think that should be excavate, but they would heat the asphalt, put the asphalt down, compact the asphalt. It was a pothole repair machine, is what I understand. But I have no idea where is that now. It probably went to the disrepair some way. It comes back to asset maintenance. We could import it. We can import the technology, but would we maintain it? And how long would it be of service useful? Would it be useful in maintaining the integrity of our assets? Right? Comes back to say with river levels. I mean, why don't we have proper river level gauges that you can monitor on a real-time basis what's the level in the river, and it feeds back to a central system somewhere where you have real-time data how the rivers are increasing in level, and then you could OPDM could put out their notices. Okay, in this particular area having the river level, residents need to be aware of the river overtopping its banks, and this is on a real-time basis.
Correct, and that is correct, and it's not new technology. I mean, you're right. We could simply spend some money in the country and bring in such a system, because at the end of the day, the engineer's ultimate responsibility is to assist with preserving life. When we design structures, the idea is to ensure that life is preserved. Rakesh, your take. Come ahead.
There's a lot of technology and equipment that we can use to make things easier, get things done more efficiently. But I think the main challenge, again, comes down to the maintenance of it. So that pothole repair machine might probably have some part that's missing. Some rubber might be some damage or something like that. And then that is packed aside and we just leave it there until it deteriorates further. So we need to change our mindset and the culture that we have towards maintenance in order for us to really move forward in a serious way. Because for some reason, it feels as though we don't really embrace the technology and utilize it to our benefit. I'm not sure if it's because people feel it would replace workers and, we have less workers, whether they sense that.
No, that is a genuine concern, yeah.
So that is something that we might be the situation. But definitely we need to start using technology, because, I mean, it is where we should be headed if we are to be heading in any particular positive direction.
All right. So we're in the final 10 minutes of the session. And of course, just for the sake of information, we've had a maximum of 17 persons online. And that will dovetail into my next question, which is, I have seen seminars like this, right? Where we talk these issues that Jane Public wants to do. I was watching the numbers yesterday in Dr. Furlong's seminar. It was similar. And then I say to myself, why are people not watching? Why aren't more people watching? And I wonder if it is that there is a lack of trust in engineers, given some of the so-called procurement hurdles we faced over the years. But I know some engineering would have taken a bad rap with. So we're talking procurement. We want to talk how we could restore first of all, how are we going to restore confidence in the public? And then we could take the procurement questions after. So how do we restore confidence to the public that they could trust us as engineers, that we know what we're saying and we want the best for the country?
That's a very hard question to answer, to be honest.
All right, let me answer the question. And I'm going to ask it and answer it, right? This is one of these things I think we should do as engineers, and is advocate passionately, which is what we're doing right now, which is what I've been doing some of. And we need more engineers to advocate. And when I mean advocate, we're not talking about, being insultive, attacking the minister, prime minister, what have you. But advocating on the issues. Like today's seminar is exactly that, right? We need to talk about how we could advocate to convince the public and convince the society, and of course those in authority, that we are the professionals. Yes, we will listen to you because we need to be humble about certain things. And we listen to you, but at the end of the day, we have decisions to make. And that actually has elicited a comment from our Dr. Ray Furlong. Because I listened to Dr. Furlong's seminar yesterday. It was quite excellent on this whole issue of traffic, transportation, infrastructure. And it's not as everybody would say. John Public would say, no, to solve traffic, we had to do A, B, C, and D, but we need to listen to the professionals. So he has a comment, and I thought I would want to mention it from Dr. Furlong. I have listened from the beginning. I have enjoyed it thoroughly. Thanks, Dr. Furlong. I have as well. You had planned to speak on time of concentration for drainage. Did I miss it? Well, no, you didn't miss it. Well, you may have, because we did touch on time of concentration. And I know there has been some comments in the public about it. So I don't want to touch on that right now because we're going into more of the final 10 minutes or 9 minutes. Unless I can beg our panel to go another 10 minutes. Can I? Can I beg you all for another 10 minutes?
Yeah, I can make another 10 minutes.
All right. So we will go till 5:40. So that allows any more questions online and that kind of thing. So we're talking now about restoring confidence, right? And I said that I talked about advocating. And perhaps you're right, Adish, that we need some of the associations to be stand up and advocating. Every month you publish something. I know the Construction Management Institute does some advocacy. Rakesh, if you want to talk about that as the president, you could go ahead.
Yeah, so basically, we try to report factual information. And apart from reporting factual information, we also try to put out there research information coming out of the construction management student arm of the institute, where there's a lot of research that's being done on a lot of different topics. And what we tend to do is share this information because it's research information, rather than it go into the library and it just stays there and nobody knows about it, right? And we also are trying to encompass, rather than everybody operate in silos, we need to really come together and encompass. And that's the only way I see that what we are doing here in terms of our advocacy, if we don't get everybody involved, then it's going to be a even more of a challenge to restore the confidence. As more and more bodies come together and we evolve, for example, the TTCA, APET, the Board of Engineering, the Institute of Architects. Once we start to operate holistically and there's one drive, I believe that the change that we're looking for would be more or closer in the horizon than we anticipate. And that is where we should be headed. Because if we as professionals, yes, we are here trying to, give out information, get people to listen, but we really have to come together in order to make a significant impact and get the persons who we want to hear to start to listen.
Agreed. Totally agreed with that. Totally supported. I think the unified approach is sometimes challenged by persons who might be fearful of, political victimization, especially given that a lot of us are doing contracts with the government. There might be some fears that persons on boards, they might lose a position, but you see, there's a way we could engage. And so when we have seminars like these, or we advocate in the media, there's a way we could engage professionally without, seeming to support one political regime or the other. And so for me personally, I stay away from that. Now, you talk about research, and Adish also talked a lot about research. And the question is, we have two universities in Trinidad. We have UWI, where I work, and of course you have UTT, with respected professionals. And you did talk about research, because a lot of the assignments that students do in their undergraduate or even the postgraduate or even the doctoral level, the research is good from both universities. It's high quality. Why haven't we been able, therefore, to use this research to solve the problems that we face in society with our floods, or roads and so on? Because I remember there was one young lady, and she was doing her doctorate at the same time as me, and her doctorate was developing coastal defense using coconut trees. I thought that was excellent research. So the question is, in your opinion, why is the research not dovetailing into our solutions?
Well, is the funding available to progress it from theory to practical? That's my question. Is that funding available?
That's an excellent point. Excellent point. Even in my own research, when I was doing my PhD in the construction procurement, because it's procurement and I had to get data relating to tender evaluation and such, the persons were very resistant to give me that kind of data. And I mentioned that in my Viva. And then beyond my PhD, then I wanted to test out this tool that I've been developing. And again, funding might have been frustrating, but there's also, in my opinion, a view that research is just desktop and to be packed up in a library. So the question is, have we been using our research to form the solutions, and do we respect research in Trinidad, or do we just think it is for the requirements and fulfillment of a degree, and then the research is parked? What should we do more to allow research to have its day?
No, I think the government should have some sort of program in place that they have a means for looking at these research, the various types of research studies that were done, and probably select one that they could take, that they could provide the funding so you can take this research and implement it into a practical solution to see how it works. I mean, let's just use these secondary roads. You have all these roads, and you want to minimize damage to the roads. I was reading. I mean, I was a member of the American Society for Civil Engineers, so I used to get newsletters regularly. And one thing that they did is these mining roads, they would take old truck tires, cut out one sidewall, truck tires, because the truck tires, the sidewalls are strong. The
Right.
construction are stronger than passenger cars. So truck tires, cut out one sidewall, lay them side to side along the length of the road, and then infill the truck tire with the aggregate. So when you apply the load, the truck tire confines the aggregate and prevents it from moving away and getting potholes and ruts and things like that. Right? Why doesn't the government fund a test strip? We have a lot of truck tires just going to the dump. Take a road take a road somewhere where you have these some serious subgrade issues, and let's build a test strip like that. When we design roads and you're using geogrid and geotextiles, the client asking you, well, you have to import that, and there's US funds going out. Okay, fine. Let's use a similar principle, but a lower technology, just truck tires. They're doing the same as the geogrid. They're preventing the stresses from being concentrated in one area. They're keeping the aggregate together. They prevent them from displacing. That's a simple solution. And we dealing. There's two things we do. We deal with the environment. We put in less truck tires in the dump, and we're doing something for John Public in the roads. To me, this is a secondary road company. They should, which is a government enterprise. They should be looking at that technology to help. I mean, yes, but at least let's build a test strip, and let's prove the technology, prove that. But again, it's come back to funding. The government should see not just one project, but take a few projects. And I mean, there's a means test that they can use as transparent. And when they select these projects, let's try and give the researchers the funding to implement this thing practically for the development of the country, for the improvement of the country. That's what the government should be doing. And to me, I don't see evidence of that. I'm not saying there isn't, but I just don't see the evidence of that happening. When I was doing my master's degree, I needed data on road repair costs and road construction costs and what it costs for the government. I asked the Ministry for information, right? And they had nothing to give me basically. I had to use information from Ghana in my master's degree for my master's thesis. Information on Ghana. I honestly want to use information from Trinidad in my research.
Correct.
And I was going to give the ministry a copy of my thesis, at least whether they implement it or just, as I say, park it up somewhere and just say, well, that's just research. We don't need to look at that. But I mean, somebody needs to step forward. Even if it's not the government, at least some of these, even probably a contractor could or the contractors, at least the contractor association could get together as an agency and fund at least one particular research project. Let's implement this. Let's see if we can take this research and how we can implement it practically and provide funding for that. You know, it's what it's,
there's an excellent session about the
everybody was relying on the government, but what about private? The bigger corporations, the bigger institutions in Trinidad, they would also benefit.
Agreed. Rakesh, your take.
What we need to start to understand in Trinidad is that we need to start to look away from only profits, right? A lot of us are just concerned about profits. There is no room for innovation. There's no room for green technology. If in 2022 we can't even recycle plastic, right? What kind of technology we really looking at? For example, one of a research I did where I was able to use recycled concrete and manufacture a new concrete with an even higher compressive strength, right? And if we invest close to $500,000 TT in a project like that, we could bring a plant to Trinidad and start recycling concrete. But do we really want to do that and stop purchasing aggregate, or do we want to continue to purchase aggregate? You see, we have to have a certain mindset in order for these things to work, right? And everything is only based on profit, and the bottom line is profit, then the interest for innovation, green technology, etc., it just would never happen. To date, we cannot get off the ground a proper solar project, right? We have been hearing about solar project putting back onto the national grid. If you build a house today and you producing a certain level of solar energy and you have excess, you cannot sell it to the government because there's no policy or legislation to do that. And we are in that position. So the drive just isn't there. Nobody wants to focus on that because there may not be any profit or gain from that. And that is the culture and the reality we're living in. Yeah. And
you're right. The issue with the profits is that, I mean, the economy, well, some people argue the economy is progressing. Some people say, no, we're in recession. The thing about profits is that there must be incentives. Because all contracts, you know this, are let on profit, right? I mean, contractors' business is to make profit, right? And the thing about profit is that we must have some incentive, as Adish is also kind of keen into, to do some of these projects. I mean, Adish talked about private sector sponsoring projects, and I think we need to get there. But tied in with all of this seem to be our ethical underpinning, because now we're seeing some ethical issues, and this is now the last 7 minutes of our seminar, and we're in overtime. What they call in football sudden death, you know, World Cup coming up, so we're in sudden death right now. Ethics. Let's talk about this road project. And again, we're going to refrain from being slanderous or libelous, as the case may be. But we're talking about it from a technical standpoint. This road that was created in Tobago for the carnival or something. And there was some great consternation that there was no CEC applied to the construction of this road, which is clearly under the designated order activities for coastal developments. It's there in the Environmental Act. And the question now is, are we reaching a point in the country, and anyone can take this question, are we reaching a point in this country where we seem to be violating our own systems or going against our own system for the sake of expediency? What is your take on that? Who wants to take that? Rax, you want to take that first and then Adish?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think a lot of these, we have a certain level of convenience when it comes to certain approvals, and we really need to, it should be one standard across the board. For example, the persons who are trying to do the right thing and be above board, as you know, face a lot of resistance sometimes, right? And for state agencies going through the approval process, sometimes it becomes so challenging that it makes you feel as though the only way to get through the system is to pay off somebody or to, you know, have a friend inside and these kind of things. And it shouldn't be that way. And is it that the system itself is so cumbersome that it just is working against people wanting to apply for approval, wanting to do it properly, and these kind of things? And whether or not, I mean, people are throwing a blind eye at certain, you know, approvals. It is a cause of concern, and we have seen certain projects and certain things getting approved while others don't get that, or it takes a very long time. So yes, I mean, we have to consider that, why, question why, and look at the ethical part of it when it comes to approvals and the persons who are actually working on these things. And a lot of the times it's not really the technocrats in the position where they given the final say. As you would know, in a lot of these agencies, it becomes a cover yourself kind of situation where you would make a certain recommendation and then somebody else goes against that. And that really takes away the joy from the job, because you're just spending a lot of time covering yourself rather than, you know, getting some sort of job satisfaction out of it.
Arish, your take?
Oh, yeah, I share a similar sentiment. I mean, I have seen projects where the certain educational institutions are being built, and there's a design build contract where the contractor is responsible for getting all the approvals in place, and the contractor does a design and they make the application, but they haven't gotten the relevant approvals, and the client tell them, "Oh, so go ahead and start a construct," and the client is the state. So the state violating their own rules and regulations. So why should, I mean, and that just filters down to John Public, and again, that's why where we are as a society right now. You have to set the example from the top, and in my opinion, that's not happening.
And you're right. And now that we're in the final 3 minutes of this, I just had a comment online. An engineering consulting firm and a contractor should get together to implement a pilot road project using method mentioned by Engineer Suresh. Quite right. I couldn't support that comment more. So now that we're in the final 2 minutes, we're going to go to close now. And this is the final question for each of you. If you were the Minister of Works, what would be the first thing you do to address the concerns of the public with respect to roads, drainage, bridges, and landscapes in Trinidad? Starting with Adish.
Well, again, if I was the Minister of Works, I mean, I am taking the position. I'm not really a technical person, but I would want to see what was our asset base, and what asset maintenance plans we have in place. What do we have in terms of, do we have a structured asset maintenance plan in place, and how are we measuring the effectiveness of this asset maintenance plan? Right. I mean, the first thing I learned in my master's degree was don't build any new roads. Just maintain what you have, and give the public alternative means of transportation. Right. You have a more efficient mass transit system. Right. You're sure you have an efficient mass transit system that the public has confidence in. Right. Do we have confidence in PTSC? No, we don't. The bus, you always see the buses shutting down all over the place. Again, come back to what's their asset maintenance program? Are they keeping it? Do they have funding to maintain it? But as the minister works, I would want to see what is my asset base and what is my maintenance plans. I don't think we need to go and build new roads. I just think we need to maintain what we need to maintain. We need to give the public confidence in the public transportation system that we have. And I mean, that itself is a whole seminar itself. And again, we need to convince the public that you know, Trinidadians are very comfortable. Trinidadians like comfort. They want to get out of walk out of their door, jump in their car, and reach their destination, jump out and get to the door. They don't see carpooling as really an option. They don't see the mass transit system. Again, that itself has problems, right? That has some problems, but I mean, the maxi taxis are a somewhat efficient mass transit system. But again, it's not dropping in front of your door, right? When you go and when you need to sit down in traffic, go into Port of Spain, you look in the other cars, there's one person per car, basically, as opposed to a bus, one of those articulated buses, which could probably hold about over 100 passengers, right? Occupying the space of about 5 or 6 cars, which is 6 people, as opposed to carrying 100 people in the same space, right? But as a minister, I would want to see what's my asset base and how we maintaining this thing, and in terms of what's the development plans, and what is the metric for measuring the effectiveness of what we are doing, so we're not wasting money and throwing it down the drain. Because that the John public will see that John public will see that what we are doing, if we do it properly, is helping them. And as a politician, that's going to get, as to use Rakesh, some political mileage, right? I mean, so in a sense, I'm seeking my own personal interest, but yet I'm still seeking the country's interest also.
Correct.
And not this 5-year plan. I need to see a plan. I mean, do we have a national transportation plan right now? No, we don't. Right? I know one was started in the mid-2000s. Whether that was accepted by the ministry from the consultant or not, I can't say. But from the information I have, it wasn't accepted. They weren't satisfied with it. But have we had a national transportation plan? Do we have a national transportation plan that we are following, that we are adhering to? As from the evidence, doesn't show that. The evidence shows that we're just doing ad hoc developments all over the place. So
right,
I mean, I
know Dr. Furlong was in this session. So if we start this talk on traffic, I know we will be here another 2 hours. But an excellent point, Adish, and thank you for that contribution. And actually thank you for participating this afternoon. Rakesh, tell us what you would do first day appointed a minister. What is the action then?
Well done. I have no intention to become the minister, but the first thing I would have to look at is my funding, because without the funds, there isn't much that you can do, right? Based on the funding that we have, we need to prioritize what needs to be fixed, what needs to be maintained. And all this, Adish has said a lot, and it includes some of that, but it also has to include getting the public sector and workers back to having an enthusiastic attitude. I think a lot of work would have to be done in terms of the culture that exists in some of these agencies, where we tend to empower the workers so that we could get a little more performance out of them. Apart from that, and prioritizing which projects we are going to do that would make sense in terms of capital expenditure, but really to focus on the maintenance aspect of things based on the funding that has been allocated, so that we can really arrest the situation that we're in and have our infrastructure back in a condition where we could see it lasting for years to come. So the focus cannot be on a lot of capital and new projects, but really on maintenance also partnering with the private sector to get some of these projects or get some of these maintenance work headed in a particular direction, so that if we don't have funding coming from only the state, but involving the private sector to see whatever they can contribute for the overall development when it comes to our infrastructure.
Great points, great points. So, folks, I want to thank you definitely to Mr. Surajnath, Adish Surajnath, Head of Projects at Trindoplan, and I want to thank Mr. Rakesh Ramnath, President of the Construction Management Institute of Trinidad and Tobago, for this excellent discourse on fixing it right, as we say, or roads, bridge and drainage infrastructure. I want to reestablish the following calls: a call for annual inspection of the nation's infrastructure via report card, call for the use of experienced and qualified local consultants and contractors. I think I'm of the strong view that we have the most talented and brightest engineers and contractors in the country, and we could help solve our problems. And I also want to call for the use of transparent procurement in the execution of construction contracts, because we need transparent procurement to ensure that our taxpayers get value for money. So with those three calls, I thank you all for contributing. I also thank the attendees online. The YouTube link will be there for some time on my YouTube channel. So of course, I will generate it in different forums. I also thank the media for attending this session. I know some members of the media were here. And so with that in mind, I close the session and wish everyone a happy good afternoon. So thank you guys. Thank you. Excellent.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you.